All right, God bless you all. So today I want to do a little bit of video. It's going to be a little bit different than some of the videos that I've made. It's going to be a product review video, but I've only used this rod fishing one day. Now, this isn't a video about the longevity. This isn't a video about how long this rod lasts. That's not what this is. This little video is going to be total function about this rod that I'm getting ready to talk to you about. Okay. Number one thing I'm going to tell you is I'm not sponsored at all by this company. I'm not sponsored by, and nobody is paying me to make this video about this rod. I'm doing this specifically to hopefully help you not only think a little bit more about what we're doing, maybe to help you when we miss fish, maybe it'll help you fish these types of baits a little better. Maybe it'll help you realize that same thing that I've had to realize over the years is that there's always constantly changing things in our market to where, as far as in our market, what I mean is fishing equipment, that there are possibilities out there that different equipment stuff will blow your mind. So I've been blessed over the years, for those who haven't watched my videos, I've been blessed over the years to go fishing a lot, okay? Especially in the last 2 years, since the Lord's blessed me with the boat that I have. And I've been able, because I have good friends and because I have a bait shopper close that deals with used equipment, I've been able to trade and use a lot of equipment during those last 2 or 3 years. I've not just used them for a week or so and then be done with them, but I've actually put them to use in several different situations. I'm that kid, okay? Here's what you got to understand. I'm that kid that when it comes to things, I ask questions. I ask myself, I wonder what we'd do with this. You hear about technique-specific equipment. I'm one of those guys that had a different rod for every situation. Not bragging on myself, I'm just saying that's just what I did. Okay, one of the techniques that is very dear to my heart, but that I got away from a little bit because of my shoulder as I'm getting older, is jig fishing. And one of the little things that has happened here lately that I've gotten back to jig fishing is because of the equipment that I've been blessed with to get. Now, you've seen me talk about the flipping jigs and the jigs with the heavy wire, but there is another type of fishing which is very common, especially in winter or hard fishing, and it's little finesse jigs. Finesse jigs, even though we think they're exactly the same as any other type of jig, they kind of are and they're not. I'll explain that. They're still a jig, so it's still a lead-headed weight, and it's still a hook, a little skirt, depending on how thick you put on it, and a little bait that you put on it, okay? That part's still the same. The difference is that most of your finesse jigs have either a smaller wire hook. Therefore, if you use heavier line, most of the time you'll tend to straighten that out. Also, though, it has a lot to do with your rod, and that's what we're going to talk about. So when you go to set the hook on this jig, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get a penetration that's going to go all the way through the fish's jaw. You do sometimes, but not always. And if you do, it's very hard because of that little bitty hook actually penetrating the thickness of especially bigger fish. That's where the problem comes to. Hooking smaller fish sometimes is easy because they are smaller, their lips material is smaller, they're thinner, so therefore that little hook becomes a big hook to a small fish. But when you start getting into a bigger fish, the problem is a lot of times you skin hook those fish, whether it be in the roof of the mouth or the side of their mouth. Sometimes even if they swallow the jig, sometimes that's a bad thing because you actually wind up skin hooking inside their mouth, way back in their mouth. A lot of guys that fish jigs are going to know this. So it's very hard sometimes to fish these little baits and not get discouraged and upset. you know. And a lot of times what we think about using smaller diameter line. Okay, then how do I drive that hook? Well, I've got to have a hook. I've got to have a rod that's got a little more backbone, but I want it to have a little bit of bend. So we all go through all these different scenarios to find ourselves a rod that we think is the best rod for it. Then you get into sensitivity and you get into all these other discussions, okay? I've been blessed to use, I couldn't tell you how many different rods. And you all know that the Loomis is probably one of my favorites. But here lately, not because I've been sponsored, not because I've made a deal, I just happened to run across, somebody asked me, said, hey, won't you try one of these rods out? You know, I'm selling a few for fairly cheap. They're used, some of them are used. I want you to try them out and see what you think of them and give me your honest opinion. So I did that, and I did that with that little Falcon cranker. Well, after I used that Falcon cranker long enough, I gave up. My favorite crankbait rods that I had, sold them. And went out and bought me eventually a second Falcon cranker. Why did you do that? Because sensitivity, lightweight, and I was getting fish in. Not just little fish, I was getting bigger fish in. Okay, I was getting the same fish that I was getting with the other one with less trouble to my shoulders. What I didn't expect was that I would start picking up these same Falcon cara rods and start getting different techniques with it. I've got one for spinner baits, and we'll talk about that some other day. Right now, what we're going to talk about is this one that I recently got. It's called Falcon Dragger. This rod's 20 pound test is what its rating is. 3/8 to 1 ounce is the weight that it recommends to throw with this. 7 foot, like I said, it's a dragger. Now, here's the kicker. This has a flex of a medium fast. That means that this rod actually, even though to me it has more of a medium heavy fast, is what it has. So this has a heavy backbone, almost all the way 75 to 80% up. But then it also has a nice tip, but it's not your normal tip. This isn't a whippy tip, okay? This is a flexible tip, but it's not a whippy tip. You see right there, it doesn't, but it bends not quite like an arch, but it bends pretty good. When you set the hook on a fish, it does bend a little bit more depending on the size of the fish. And that's what I ran into with those smallmouth at Cumberland. Those bigger smallmouth, I like using this finesse jig. But what I don't like doing is throwing this on a regular jig rod. And I don't like throwing it on a medium heavy because I feel like I don't get the right hook set. Okay, because the medium heavy tends to bend a little easier. This rod, though, has the best reaction time I've ever seen, because the medium heavy, when I go to set the hook, hurts my shoulders after I do it several times. This rod did not. And this rod, the weight on it is ridiculous how light this is, okay? This also amazed me because of the sensitivity. I've had NRXs before. This has the sensitivity. I would put it up there with an NRX Plus. You say, you serious? Yes, I'm telling you the truth. And it's interesting because I've seen several other people post comments that they sold their NRX Plus in order to get this rod, get these rods right here, because of the sensitivity behind them. The sensitivity behind this rod absolutely amazed me. I could feel, when I was at Cumberland, I could feel every one of those rocks, gravel, this was coming over. I could feel the little tree stumps. I could tell when it was popping over a tree limb. And all I have on here, I get it if you were dragging a 3/4 football jig, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But I was throwing a 5/16 with wind. The wind was probably about 9 miles an hour, blowing back in that cove. Okay? I'm telling you, I could feel that little jig bouncing around. Not just bouncing, I could tell it was rock it was dinging against. This is lead. This isn't, we're not talking about tungsten, okay? This is lead, and I could feel it. This is 20-pound Red Label cigar. This is not a high-dollar, big, expensive, none of this equipment is. None of it, okay? Now, I do have a super light Chronarch MG on here, but that does not mean, that does not take away from how light this is. This setup is amazingly light. yet it has the backbone. You say, well, why is that rod, what do you think it was designed to do? That's what's interesting. I never thought about it. This rod is called the Dragger 2. And when you start watching the videos about the guys who did this, they actually designed this rod to throw a football jig. Guys designed this that loved throwing football jigs, because literally the way you fish a football jig is you drag it on the bottom. The reason it has that bend to it is because while you're dragging it on the bottom, almost like the old Carolina rigs, your rod would load up and you would simply pull back and make a hook set. So what did you have common between a finesse jig and a football jig? You have this hook right here. A lot of people think, well, I just want to step up my hook. Well, a lot of times that works, okay? I have a finesse jig that's one of my favorite ones for throwing into heavy cover, okay? And it has a little bit heavier, and you say, well, why didn't you just throw that? Well, because I specifically wanted this wire guard in the wintertime, because I have that little brush jig that I have, that little finesse one with a little bit heavier brush guard, so that I can bring it through trees. So I wanted that finesse approach, but I wanted it for heavy cover. This one here, I'm not looking for something in heavy cover. What I'm looking for something is something to do a little bit of both worlds, but I want something I can drag around on those little rocks, at Cumberland especially. I want something I can drag around on those rocks, and when those smallmouth hit it, I get a good hook set. That smaller wire helps me get that good hook set because it is smaller. There's some days, are you kidding me? They'll hit this right here and knock it, and you set the hook and do whatever you want to. You can use a heavy flipping hook. But there are times of the year where this little finesse jig is better. Remember, everybody asks me, what's your favorite? Look, my favorite is whatever those fish are biting. I want to catch them. I enjoy the tug of war between those big smallmouth, big spotted bass, and largemouth. That's what I love. I love playing tug of war with them. That's the whole key. So I'll use whatever tool you need me to use to catch them. That's what this is about. So the guys designed this to be able to set this hook at a long distance with 15-pound fluorocarbon on this lighter wire hook. And most of the time, football jigs either have no wire guard or a little bit of wire. They have a wire guard. You know, sometimes they have a bush guard, but for the most part, this is how they are with this little wire guard. Well, it winds up perfect for this little finesse jig that's got this wire guard too. And if I wanted to throw a little finesse jig that had a little light wire guard, you could use that as well. But it amazed me because this rod has the backbone, but yet it would keep those fish pinned. They weren't jumping, throwing it, doing all that. And like I said, the sensitivity was unreal. Why am I telling you all this? Same reason I've made every one of the other videos. Because I've been blessed to learn a few things over the years, and hopefully I can pass it along, and you all can do great as well. Maybe it'll help you put a few more fish in the boat. But like I usually tell you, most important thing to me is that you realize that Jesus loves you, and that simply this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be helping one another do better. So that's what this is about. So I've run into something that blessed me, and I figured I would pass it on. Hopefully it'll bless you all. I'm not saying you have to go out and get this rod. What I'm saying is when you're having trouble, if you're having trouble losing fish on little finesse jigs or little ones that have that smaller wire, think about your rod. You may need something that's not so stiff. You may need something that's got a little more bend to it. But you're going to have to find that happy medium, because every manufacturer is not the same. Every manufacturer says medium heavy, that doesn't mean they have the right medium heavy. You say, well, man, I've got to go through a lot of process. You may very well have to. My advice to you is ask different friends that you have. Say, hey, do you have a rod, or do you fish this type of bait? What kind of rod do you use? You'll be surprised. They're like, well, I usually use this. Why do you use that? Ask them questions about it. Anyway, hope this helps you all. Hope it blesses you. Like I said, the model on this rod here is a CC617. Perfect, in my opinion, for these wired finesse jigs. And like I said, I've only used it one day, but I'm amazed at how sensitive and how good that little rod is. God bless you all. Y'all have a wonderful day. Don't forget, Jesus loves you. Thank you all for subscribing. Thank you all for sharing the videos. Hope you all have a blessed day.